Have you ever looked at a chart of gender symbols and felt like you were trying to crack some kind of secret code? Yeah, I get that. But what if we thought about it a different way? Not as a puzzle, but as a language. A language that tells these incredible stories of identity, of history, and of some very real-world struggles. So, let's get fluent together. Okay, I know, looking at this whole chart at once can feel pretty overwhelming, but trust me, every single one of these symbols is so much more than just a cool icon. It's a story. Each one represents entire communities, real individuals, and their ongoing fights for recognition in their rights. Our goal today is to unpack all of this. So by the end of this, you're going to see the people and the meaning behind every single icon. All right, so we're going to start with the basics, the symbols you probably already recognize. But you're going to see how quickly these foundational ideas branch out into a way wider and honestly a much more interesting way of understanding gender. So let's kick things off with two of the most ancient symbols in this whole lexicon. On the left, you've got the symbol for female, which actually comes from the astronomical symbol for Venus, and on the right, the symbol for male, which is derived from Mars. For centuries, these two have really been the default symbols for the whole gender binary. But here's the thing, these aren't just abstract ideas. Each symbol represents a group with very real-world stakes. For women, that means ongoing tough legislative battles over reproductive rights and workplace equality. And, while men as a group generally hold more systemic power, it is so crucial to remember that men from marginalized communities, like men of color or gay men, they face their own very specific targeted forms of violence and legal challenges. Okay, so here's a concept that's absolutely vital for us to understand as we move forward. Transgender. It's basically an umbrella term. It's for anyone whose gender identity, so their internal, deep-down sense of who they are, doesn't line up with the sex they were assigned at birth. This is a key idea for so many of the identities we're about to explore. And this symbol, it does a perfect job of illustrating that idea. You can see how it combines the male arrow and the female cross, but it also adds this third, combined prong. That represents all the identities that exist beyond that simple male-female binary. And right now, this very symbol is at the absolute heart of these intense political battles over everything, from bathroom access in sports to the legality of life-saving, gender-affirming medical. So now that we have the foundations down, let's move on. We're going to go way beyond the binary and really explore the incredible diversity of identities that exist on a much, much broader spectrum. Now, to help make all of this a little easier to digest, we're going to break it down. So first up, let's talk about identities that are defined not really by what they are, but by what they're not. Specifically, we're talking about their relationship with the whole concept of gender itself. Now, here's where the nuance gets really interesting. On the left, we have agender, which literally means without gender. You'll often see the symbol with a bar crossing out the circle. But on the right, you've got neutrois, which describes a neutral gender. See the difference? It's not an absence, but a distinct identity all on its own. And this subtle distinction is super important because both groups face constant erasure when, forms and systems demand you pick a gender. Okay, so from an absence of gender, let's pivot to the total opposite experience, having more than one gender. So bigender individuals identify with two distinct genders. That experience can happen at the same time, or it can kind of shift and fluctuate. Pangender, on the other hand, is an identity that can encompass many or even all genders at once. And you can probably imagine the legal challenge here, right? Basically, no government on Earth allows you to have two, let alone all, gender markers on official IDs, which forces people into a choice that just doesn't reflect who they are. The spectrum also gets way more specific. It includes partial connections to a gender identity. And this is where the demi identities come into play. So a demiboy is someone who partially but not completely identifies as a boy or a man. And similarly, a demigirl partially identifies as a girl or a woman. These folks often find themselves in a really tough spot. They can sometimes be excluded from trans spaces for being, quote, not trans enough, while at the very same time, they're directly hit by the sweeping legislation that bans gender-affirming care for any young person who's exploring their identity. All right, for our final section, we're going to connect these symbols even more directly to the real-world legal and social battles these communities are fighting every single day. So, as you're looking back at our big chart, you might notice something a little weird. The symbol for Butch looks exactly like the symbol for male. So is that a mistake? Nope, not at all. It's actually a really crucial lesson in context. Look at this. On the left, the male symbol is about a gender identity. But on the right, the Butch symbol is about gender presentation, a masculine identity often, though not always, used by lesbians. Historically, butch women faced police brutality for breaking laws that actually criminalized women for not wearing female clothing. And today, they are often the targets of anti-trans bathroom laws, even though many are cisgender women. It's the same symbol, but a totally different context and a totally different struggle. And this kind of legislative targeting is happening right now. Genderqueer people who embrace genders outside the norm are often the direct targets of so-called anti-drag laws, which are written so broadly they can criminalize gender impersonation. And then you have intersex people, those born with variations in their sex characteristics, who have fought for decades against the historical practice of doctors performing non-consensual surgeries on them as infants, all to make them fit a binary box. Now, let's look at a symbol that really drives home the importance of cultural context. This is the symbol for travesti, a gender identity that's specific to Latin America. It's not just a personal identity, it's a political and social one. It refers to people who are assigned male at birth and who live in a very feminine way, but who might not identify as women in the way the Western world understands it. Now, despite some really progressive laws, like Argentina's amazing gender identity law, the reality on the ground is just grim. Because of systemic violence, discrimination, and hate crimes, the average life expectancy for a travesti is just 35 years old. That number just stops you in your tracks. It shows the literal life or death stakes behind this fight for recognition.
So what I really hope you take away from all this is that these symbols are not just lines on a screen. They are flags. They're flags for entire communities of real people who are fighting for the right to exist, to be recognized, and to be safe. And it really leaves us with one final thought. As our language for who we are continues to grow and evolve, what story will the next symbol tell?